You probably woke up this morning to the alarm of your iPhone. If you had an iPhone, or if you have an iPhone, you're probably half asleep still in the dark. You're using Face ID to unlock your phone. That was amazing AI at work, right? It's extremely reliable how it detects your face. While you were asleep, maybe you had an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or something like that. Your heartbeat was monitored, your sleep was monitored. Again, these were AI algorithms at work. While you were sitting on the toilet, you maybe scrolled through your Facebook feed or your Instagram or whatever it was. AI algorithms presented you with some good images, some good content, lots of ads that you were likely to click on. Again, AI algorithms at work. Your smart water heater made sure that you had enough water while you were waiting for your shower this morning. During breakfast, you talked to Alexa and decided to maybe order a tool for your dog. Dynamic pricing was at work, and fraud detection while your credit card was being charged was at work. Again, AI algorithms behind the scenes. You hopped in your car, you used Spotify that presented you with a list of songs that you were likely going to like, and you used Google Maps that was suggesting you the optimal route using predictive dynamics and AI tools to analyze real-time traffic data, so you got here on time. AI has quietly changed our lives, our everyday lives. There's no question that many aspects of our lives are now determined by algorithms. Is that good or bad? Let's talk about it. How did we even get here, right? I want to give you sort of three important points in history that got us there. Alan Turing, one of the fathers of modern computer science in the 40s, really bootstrapped the field of AI, proposing algorithms and machines that would learn from experience, that would adapt and gradually become better and better. Today we talk about deep neural networks, transformers, large language models, and all kinds of other fancy buzzwords. But really these models are nothing really fundamentally different from all these early AI models, right? We use a lot more big data, we use more sophisticated computers, but really the fundamental algorithms stay pretty much the same. And I'm simplifying a lot here. Alan Turing didn't have big data at that point, right? A lot of the things he did were done on paper with pencil. But today we have huge amount of data, right? Never in history do we have more data than now, and it only continues to get bigger and bigger. And that is clearly an enabler for these models that can then learn from that big data that we've collected over the last decades. The third really important part is what's called Moore's Law. The building blocks of your computers, of your cell phones, is what's called transistors. That's literally a switch, but a very small switch, and we have billions and billions of these switches or transistors in our phones, in our computers, right? Intel out in Hillsboro made these switches smaller and smaller and smaller over the last 50, 60, 70 years. It turns out the smaller you make these switches, the faster you can run them and the more you can cramp into a smaller space. Moore's Law says that roughly every 2 years we double the number of these transistors in a computer, which means we got better computers over the last several decades, basically for free, right? Computers were getting faster and are performing more computations in the same amount of time, right? So Moore's Law really allowed us over the last decades to do more and more and more of computation. So together with these models and big data and more computing powers, we are here now, and we have ChatGPT, and we have a lot of these really cool things that we could not imagine 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Where are we going? Well, nobody really knows. In the 50s, we had AI models, we had no big data, we had no good computers, right? Nothing really exciting going on. 90s, 80s, we had sort of traditional neural networks, small-scale AI models, route planning, right, was starting to take off. Nothing really so exciting, but today we have ChatGPT, and I would argue that really is the tip of the iceberg of what we have with AI, right? It's very much just the beginning. What I believe is happening is a little bit what's happening with computers, right? Over the last decades, we've seen computers disappear more and more. Your car is essentially a driving computer. This room is controlled by hundreds of processors that we don't even see, that we don't know what they're doing. I think the same will happen with AI. Algorithms will disappear more and more and just creep into our everyday lives without us realizing how much is actually controlled by algorithms. We may still see the tip of the iceberg, right? But that's really going to be very much hidden by all the really amazing things going on at that sort of like hidden layer. Anyway, that's just a small prediction, right? Nobody knows where this is going, but we're living in very, very exciting times, and I want to talk a little bit about the good and the bad and some other things. Good. Gartner every year comes out with these hype cycles. I think it's very obvious that a lot of the AI that we hear about in the news specifically is hype. And that's okay. That happens with almost any technology. Right, we're going through this innovation trigger phase, and then we have a peak of inflated expectations, and then a trough of disillusionment, and eventually we'll get to the plateau of productivity. Right? We're not quite there yet. Right? A lot of these things, we're excited about ChatGPT, everybody uses it, and we know the limitations, but we're going to get over that peak of inflated expectations, and eventually we'll get something that we can really use and that we can trust. Right now, that's not really the case. But again, keep in mind, we're on that slope. Good, so that's the good, or part of the good. Now, is it good that we have turned ourselves over to algorithms? My take is that probably yes. Probably yes, because humans tend to make bad decisions in many, many aspects. And having tools that help us to make better decisions and have more convenient lives, that's not a bad thing, right? Now, how much control do we want to have still over these things, and do we trust these things? Well, okay, big philosophical questions, right? But that was the onion. It's a joke. Right? Good. All right, well, there's a recent report that came out of Stanford, and they looked at 10 takeaways from recent AI developments, and I think there's two things that you can't really read this, but there's two things that are really important. AI has made workers more productive, and increasing also the quality of work, and I see that with my students, right? They use ChatGPT daily. That's their new thing, their new tool. Scientific progress has also increased. We've used AI to come up with new solutions to problems that we couldn't solve before, right? And there's a lot of other cool things that are happening. So really, good things are happening. This AI hype has enabled society to do better in many ways. And I'm not saying there's bad things, and we'll get to that in a minute. Good. What's the bad? And again, I don't want to create like a doomsday scenario of any sorts, but there are a lot of things that we have to pay attention to. And one thing is perhaps to start with the CO2 emissions. ChatGPT is a public software. You can download it, you can train it on your computer if you wanted to, but really you don't have the big data, you don't have the server farms that are necessary to train these models. Training ChatGPT 3, which is already outdated, used way more CO2 than your entire life that you will generate during your entire lifetime, right? Because you need to run a data center, you need to use a lot of computers to train these models, and that is not free. That generates CO2 because you need electricity, and a lot of electricity is still generated by coal plants and whatnot, right? So generating or training these models has a huge environmental cost. And you can see that in some of the headlines. AI uses already as much energy as a small country. It's only beginning, right? A simple Google search uses 0.3 watt-hours of electricity, while if you do a search or a query on ChatGPT, it uses almost 3 watt-hours, so almost 10 times more. And for comparison, like a standard light bulb, that's usually 60 watts. So whenever you use ChatGPT, there's a cost. You don't see that cost. You don't pay for it, right? Unless you pay the subscription, perhaps, but you're not paying that energy directly, right? But there's an environmental cost associated with using these AI models. Not just for training them, for using them as well. SRC, the Semiconductor Research Corporation, came up with this interesting visualizations a year or two ago, where they looked at the energy production and what computers, the energy that computers use currently. If we would continue to use the same type of computers and use more and more of those as we do, we would hit the world's energy production sometime in the 2035-ish range, right? Because computers use more and more power, and we have more and more computers, more and more data centers, well, we have a problem, right? Unless we do something, unless we build a better system, and that's one of their suggestions, we can build a better computer that is more power efficient, we would still eventually hit that world's power consumption, but things look much better. And Landauer limit is sort of the ultimate physical limit. You can't build a computer that is better than the Landauer limit. Anyway, that assumes a constant energy production, which is not really a realistic assumption, but anyway, we have a problem because computers use a lot of power and each time use ChatGPT. Somewhere in a data center, somebody needs to turn a crank, right? Good, all right, so the other problem, and if you drive to Eastern Oregon, you will see lots of data centers and more are being built. You recognize them by the cooling towers and no windows and barbed wires around and whatnot, right? Data centers need to be cooled. That's a big issue. And here's some data I found. Using ChatGPT, 50 questions, asking 50 questions, uses about 500 milliliters of water, so half a liter of water. That's mainly the cooling that is needed for the data centers, right? So again, a huge environmental cost by using these sorts of AI tools. And we're just scratching the surface of this issue. Intel is trying to build much more power efficient computers for that sort of purpose so that we don't hit that world energy production. And that's also one thing that my lab and my team are doing. We're building very special computers that are able to build or run these AI algorithms very power efficiently. And so that is one of the good and futuristic or promising directions where research is going currently. In the news, you hear a lot about robots taking over the world, and you mostly see that sort of scenario, but that I think is very unlikely to happen, but there's this scenario that is much likely going to happen and is happening as we speak. Automation of warehouses and whatnot, right? That is happening. A lot of AI goes into that, and you know, having warehouses with 0 people in them is definitely a possibility. But that robots are going to take over the world in that sort of form, walking robots, rather unlikely, I think. Good. Job postings, right? A lot of, in the news you'll read that AI is going to kill jobs. I think that is absolutely true. We'll lose jobs. But we'll also generate jobs. And here are some statistics that I've found that shows how many jobs were being created because of AI, right? You need people who build data centers. You need people who run these algorithms or develop these algorithms. And so we'll definitely see a shift in the job sort of categories, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's just all bad, right? Anyway, I won't go into details for these specific things. We clearly have a measurement problem, right? Everybody says that, well, ChatGPT, you can't trust it, it hallucinates and gives you incorrect information, et cetera, et cetera. But the real question to me is it better than humans, right? We also don't know everything. We provide false information. We hallucinate, we dream and whatnot, right? The question is not, is ChatGPT perfect? No, it's not. Is it better than us? And I think the question, or the answer in these days is yes, it already is better than us, right? It passes a lot of tests that we're not really good at, and that's only the beginning. So we don't really have a good way to evaluate those sorts of systems currently, right? And that's a problem that research needs to address as well. A big issue, and that's probably an issue for many of you folks, is that each time you actually use ChatGPT, it will use those questions and what you ask and all that information to learn from it, right? So none of what you enter into ChatGPT should be sensitive information because it can be used somewhere else, right? So a big new research field is having these models unlearn what they learned and should not know, right? That has not been a topic in research at all. For decades we tried to build models that can learn anything, but now we need models that can also unlearn certain things, right? And that's quite an interesting research topic. Good. We all know AI tools have biases, but so do we, right? Again, the question is, are these tools better than what humans can do? And I think, again, the answer is yes. They do have biases for job applications and whatnot, right? We know that it's related to data that we feed in and whatnot. It's a problem that is being addressed, but again, the question is, do they better than we do? And I think they actually do. All right, to wrap things up, and again, I don't want to have it make a doomsday scenario here, but I think one of the biggest issues currently is complete lack of trust in many of these things, right? Anything can be faked in these days. Within minutes, you can go online, you can create deep fakes with websites, right? Upload a video, upload a photo of somebody else, and you can create deep fakes that are really, 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 really good, right? Anybody can record me here talking and go to a website and clone my voice and have me say anything, right? That is the thing that any teenager can do these days, right? Huge problem. Fake news, all of that. Klaus Schwab said one of the biggest global issues is the erosion of trust, right? And the World Economic Report last year's mentions that for the 2-year time frame, misinformation and disinformation as one of the biggest threats to society. Anything can be fabricated with AI in these days, not just text, images, videos, voice, right? You can create fake news so easily, and what can we trust? Well, we don't really know, and that, I think, is a huge issue. That's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming here away from the freaks and ghouls downtown. Of course, I'm talking about the Downtown Bar Association. Inferences get us into trouble when we fill in the blanks with information we don't have, and specifically these presuppositions we make. And I'm going to do a little presupposition test, and I see a few students in the audience and they know the answer. But I'm going to describe to you an individual, and I want you to tell me what their occupation is after they graduate. Let's call, and this is from a book, and I'll tell you which book at the end. This person's name is Sally. Sally was an activist during college. After college, she became a bank teller. What's the probability, by show of hands, that after college, she is a bank teller and an activist? Show of hands. Bank teller and activist versus activist only, versus bank teller only. So, activist and bank teller, okay? Bank teller only. Okay, I'd say that's like 60-40 from the people who actually participated, thank you. So what I did there was prime you with limited information, and you may have good reasons for saying Sally's both an activist and a bank teller. Well, it's part of her identity, it's what she does. Those of you who said, well, maybe she's over it, she's an adult now, she left those activist things, it's more likely she's just a bank teller. And a statistician will tell you that, of course, the right answer is bank teller only, because the probability of two events happening simultaneously is always less than the probability of one event happening, which is why we don't have one-digit lottery numbers. And it's this idea of inferencing and how we can be almost primed on how we deal with this AI, how it primes us, and maybe through prompt engineering, that's the term I'm going to use today, we prompt it. So this framework I use is founded, 350 BC. It's an Aristotelian framework on how I like to look at how law relates to AI and our use of AI. And of course, this is a traditional logos, logic, reason, ethos, authority, trust. We trust the system, as a professor mentioned, and pathos, the emotional side, how we are charged by AI's use and the trouble we get into with these things. I'm going to primarily deal with these kind of large language models. There's machine learning, very algorithm-based, statistical, extractive AI, where you give a data set to and these are some vendors that do it. These no endorsement here. Like Databricks will look at your user data, your customer data, and help you do it, figure out how to better market to that demographic, et cetera. So the training data, another term I'll be using, is targeted with something like Databricks, with some generative AI that generate like reports and stuff, and this is a medical field one. I think there's only like one HIPAA compliant AI engine, and it really helps some of my physician customers, clients deal with charting, and it reduces their workload by hours. So it will really show good results. A lot of this model as a service platform, finance, that's the one that we interface with, the various large language models. So I'll be using these terms, I just wanted to get that. Back to the framework, logos, reason. We like to think that AI is smart and it deals with critical thinking, prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain behind your forehead, but it also can trigger our limbic system. This is the more primitive parts of our brain, the freeze, flight, fight type response. And knowing how your brain works is essential to effective use, prompt engineering, and the future of AI. And if you can get to critical thinking by default, you will avoid many legal problems. Some of our clients say, hey, I want to bring AI in my environment. What do I do? What questions should I ask? You may do what's called a request for proposal, which is when you go out to bid, or a request for quote. There are a number of questions you should ask. One of the most important things, of course, are security and what they call training data again. What's the source of data that's training that AI upon which? If it's bad data or if it's mixed data like ChatGPT, why is the output so mixed depending on what your prompt is? Because it's going to the internet, and we know that although the internet generally is 100% truthful, we know that there's a lot of bad information, and the AI is doing the best it can to help us transcend that information and get us what we really need. Next, I want to talk about this idea of ethos, authority, the trust we have in the system. And a big part of trust and lack of it and lack of expectation is where the litigation is happening. Contracts are your best evidence of the deal, of what you're getting. And there are contracts all over AI, terms of use. If, with my enterprise clients, we actually negotiate things like, what is the training data? What is the security thing with these AI vendors? And you should really know where they're getting that data and what the time, place, and manner of how you accepted those terms. A lot of AI publishers get into trouble because they can't tell you which version of the contract they posted when. If you operate a website yourself and you want to guard against AI crawling over or scraping, we'll talk about that in a minute, on your website, you want to know that those terms of use that you applied on your website to the person who visited your website at a certain time is recorded. Because if it's not, very hard to prove which terms applied when. So you've got to have good record keeping, maybe good cookie management on your website if you have terms of use there. If you're engaging a vendor, a lot of this is custom work. A lot of them are going to use the ChatGPT or some other API to adapt it to your business. The big troika here of how to limit liability in contracts, of course, reps and warranties. What do you want them to do? What's the impact of the system if things go sideways? What's your recovery? Indemnification, which is who pays for what. A popular indemnification contract is known as an insurance policy. Make sure your insurer is on board with what you're trying to do in your environment. I interview the insurance industry, and we'll talk about that a little bit, or a member of the insurance industry. And limitation of liability, which is what's the maximum amount I want to be out of pocket if things totally go sideways, and what's the minimum amount I want where I think I'm adequately compensated if there's a breach. This is contract 101s. All the activity now legally has got to do with your workforce, your contractors, trying to develop and innovate using your trade secrets. Trade secrets are things that are confidential, that give you a competitive advantage, or some type of economic advantage, economic value. And when you're trying to innovate something and you type in your next great idea or your next innovation, well, that's part of the corpus now. There are some LLMs that don't use user input data as training data. As the professor said, that input data becomes training data. That becomes part of the corpus of the LLM. Our records, head of our records department at the firm just uncovered a legally based LLM that does not use training data, which is a very good selling point for people who deal with confidential information if you're deploying that. Of course, patents, that's an issue with, if you disclose your patent, you have a year to file it, and once it's out there in the ether, it's public domain. Copyright is probably the most notable litigation you see, which is, the New York Times saying ChatGPT is using their articles as training data, and what ChatGPT is doing is performing derivative works, which is one of the 6 exclusive rights under copyright law, to make works based on original work. Like, Gone with the Wind 3, if I wanted to publish that book, I'd have to have the rights from the estate who owns the rights to that book. When we look at these derivative works, this is, in a hot area, it's many cases are filed, and we'll see. The question came up years ago, can AI own a copyright? And the answer is no. Only humans can own copyright, only humans can actually hold patents. So that defense is not working, that, hey, ChatGPT owns it because it's smart. It's interesting, if you want to know where your information is coming with an LLM, provide citations where it's coming from. This actually forms a defendants list to a lot of plaintiffs going after people for copyright violation. Privacy, next level, we all know about personally identifiable information. The GDPR, the European Union, just changed had some actions to refine their law on how much biological data now is tracked and monitored and stored by AI and what it does. Macro body expressions, these are things, how I move my head. There was a study done at UC Berkeley, a sample set of 2,000 subjects. They could identify their identity, their actual identity, who they are, by a 94% accuracy, which is thumbprint level human identification. That's by the way you move your head. Micro body expressions, micro expressions, these are things that our faces flash within 1/24th of a second. Paul Ekman's work, I actually took his class. It takes you a while to figure it out and see it, and I scored high after months of studying at the 90 percentile level for every emotion except for sadness. And my wife said, that tracks. So what the AIs will do is actually look at 3 bands, what your head muscles are doing, what your eye muscles are doing, what your mouth muscles are doing. And this will give you a present sense impression, help you determine what that person is thinking. You don't even need some neural brain implant to do it. Neurological data, your bodily inputs to different stimulus, that's tracked, and if we know how your body will react. Ocular data, eye tracking, cone of information. All this information is going into the corpus of knowledge. And how many times are we on a security cam, or a ring cam? All this is part of our future. It's part of our present, actually. I want to talk about data scraping. You may do it to find out who your competitors' clients are, that may be your call list. So you want to be careful at what you put on your websites. Data scraping implies that it's automated, where it'll automatically give you a report on, hey, here's what our clients are listing as testimonial people, and they're the people we want to approach, or something like that. This whole idea of scraping is the problem with the AI litigation in the New York Times case, but also we want to think about what are the causes of action if we're using LLM to scrape other websites as a scraper, as you say. And for fun, these are images rendered by AI, and I put my prompt there. This is a parade of horribles. And this is the parade of horribles. These are all the claims that have been brought with scrapers, people who took information off other people's website to gain something. One of the most famous cases, of course, was HiQ with LinkedIn, whereby they subverted LinkedIn security to very smartly, using AI, get data from LinkedIn, which of course ended badly for HiQ. A quick word about the scrapey. If you have data that's personally identifiable information on your website and you got scraped by an AI, that may be a reportable privacy breach. So think about the types of information you put on your website, because if you're the target, and if it is personally identifiable information and you did not get permission, which means testimonial, waiver, all that stuff should be part of your toolkit, can get you in trouble. Let's talk about cyber attacks. How to recover with bad actors. I was speaking with a cybersecurity professional, and they're concerned about what they call poison data in the training data. If I can find out where you're getting training data, and if I can poison it or destroy sectors of that data, how do you recover? This is an IT backup and recovery issue. I see Ethan Dunham in the crowd, IT guy. Backup and recovery is something that you have to know how it's going to be done for that model. How will they recover from some type of bad actor that may destroy the training data and make your AI that you're paying for or using or depending on irrelevant. There's bias in AI systems. This is an issue from every political persuasion. We see that coding can actually bias data in the data set, and that's something you want to be aware of, especially if you're relying on that data to make corporate decisions. Data destruction is recoverable. Of course, this is a rendering an image of Phineas Gage, who was a foreman in a railroad in the 19th century, and using dynamite like you do, a bar actually went through his skull, and it radically changed his personality. They removed the bar, he did actually survive. But what happened after that is, he, from a mild-mannered foreman, he became very agitated, violent, and all this stuff. Eventually, he recovered. And anyone who's known a stroke patient or something, we know that the brain can recover. And I think AI will do the same, but it may not be actually the same source. So that's a question for the professor and others. But the legislation is ongoing and rapid. If you just Google AI legislation tracker, and you will see dozens and dozens, or hundreds now, of different proposed legislations to regulate it. In Oregon, there's one law I know about that has to do with if you use AI in an election, you have to disclose that. Places like Singapore and Switzerland are way ahead of us in AI legislation. Products liability, if you have products liability, you're developing a product, autonomous vehicles, all these things, you're gonna get claims for products liability if the AI goes wrong. So you need to have that products liability level security and perfection of the technology and statistically relevant testing where you can actually deploy products, or you will have claims there. So here's my discussion with insurers. The actuaries don't know actually how to rate it. They are offering some protection, but their concern is how does it unlearn if there's bad data? That's a question for technologists. If the training model is unreliable, that's an issue. Employers use AI to help them vet candidates. And in this case, this settlement, they actually excluded all older folks, which is age discrimination, and they hired of a certain generation, so that's disparate impact. The AI may have an output that puts people in a certain class based on, you know, the Title VII civil rights activities. So if you're using AI in an HR function, you want to make sure that it's solid and doesn't bring you secondary liability. I want to close up, of course, with pathos. This is the emotional side of AI and how we interact with it emotionally and psychologically, which is very profound in, if you read the newspapers, on how it can get people to actually march in the streets or behave a certain way or do things. It is very profound on how it impacts humans. Some of you may be familiar with the Solomon-Asch test, which is I think a 1950s test whereby, you know, people were shown one line, they say which one matches. If the consensus agrees that the wrong line, the long line is actually the short line, the subject is more likely to agree with adults. So adults, a certain percentage will agree with the wrong answer. With children, they almost agree with the wrong answer. They're very susceptible. So robots at University of Plymouth did the study are very influential on children's opinions. And a child here, you would think of someone who doesn't have their full prefrontal cortex, which is anyone under the age of 25. That's when your prefrontal cortex stops growing. So we want to make sure that what we're using AI for. Let's talk about TikTok. TikTok, it's public record, I'm adverse to TikTok. I've done lots of enterprise agreements with TikTok. It is next level psychological persuasion that I have never seen. And it's not secret. They actually put it in their terms of use. And if you're an enterprise customer, you can actually help negotiate through those. But it's not easy. So TikTok is very sophisticated at human psychology and getting people to move in a certain direction. As I call it, it's next level psychological persuasion to sell and cause social change. So there's a lot of social and psychological mechanisms on why the AI algorithm for different social media companies is very persuasive, and it's pretty much hardwired. I have this test, I call the NDA test on the legal side, on which AIs can really do legal work. I've been practicing for almost 30 years, and I have this list of 68 elements that a really rock solid NDA will include. And I basically, here's the prompt. The prompt is draft an NDA. Google, about 20% of the elements it should have. Co-counsel, this is Thomson Reuters. This is a very good tool, but you have to apply, the attorney, it's containerized and secure. You have to supply all the training data. And when you upload the training data, it may be like the statutes, a few cases, a form. It's one of the contracts I was testing, it took like 15 minutes to compile because it's using your processor. It's not like that fast, but it didn't get, I gave it a low score because I had to write it for it. I basically had to write it for it, but it's good at, it can redline and do stuff. Copilot, this is Microsoft's, very low. I was surprised at how low Copilot, which is based on the ChatGPT backend. What is it? Llama 3 is the code set, Professor. Paxton, I think, is this an Oregon company? A Portland company? This was really intriguing because it's the only one that claims it doesn't use user prompts for training data. And that's something you want to know, especially for security reasons. Spellbound, Canadian company, that got $20 million from Thomson Reuters. Their demo was awesome. But the security thing is, it actually requires you to put a an add-on in Microsoft Word to do like contract review, which is a security concern. So we can't use it, but the demo they showed me was terrific, like most demos are. In conclusion, I just want to get us back to when we're evaluating the legal risks for AI on this matrix. Logos, what's the reason I'm deploying it in my environment? Am I trying to take a difficult, mundane, labor-intensive task out of my workforce? Great use. If it's to innovate or be creative, probably want to have a second thought about that. Ethos, what's the authority behind what's happening? Where's the training data? Is it using user prompts for training data? Who are in my company the best prompt engineers who actually get that authoritative, accurate, human-reviewed output? Which is, human review is probably at this point in AI is essential. And of course, pathos, emotion. Dealing with the psychology of how we interrelate with AI is a huge area of concern and liability. And those are my questions. Here are some books that will help you figure out how your brain works. And next, Ted Mark has, kind of an interesting take on where AI is going. But next up, April.
I will tell you a little bit about why I am here. The Lake Oswego Chamber of Commerce came to the library about a year ago and said, do you know anyone who would be a good speaker about AI? And even though I have a degree in literature and another one in art, I'm a little neurodiverse and I get special interests. And I had a special interest in AI at that time, and so the director of the library said, April will not shut up about AI. Please have them speak to you. So I went over and I did a library presentation, which is informational. So not to persuade, nothing, just like here's an overview of this topic. It went over really well. And then somehow, now in this town, I have become known as the person who knows a lot about AI. However, when I was invited to do this presentation, the invitation was a little bit different. They said, we want business advice. And I said, well, the library gives information, not business advice, and certainly it would be problematic if I work for the city and I'm giving business advice. So I talked to the director, library director agreed, and then I thought, well, what if I did it on my own? And I talked to the, the legal at the city, and they said, you could do that. And I'm like, maybe, maybe not. So I contacted them back and I said, look, I'm not an expert. What you really want is you want somebody from the local computer science department, and you want a lawyer. So I thought, that's good. I took care of that. And then I got another contact, and they said, okay, we got the lawyer, we got the computer science person, now will you come give us advice? So I'm going to do my best. I'm going to draw on my past as a literature major, doing a review of the literature for you, doing research. My only other business experience, which is working in the writing lab, helping business majors write their papers, which they were not very good at. Here is what I got. That's me. Looks the same. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. That's what I'm calling my presentation. I did research, and then I talked to the chatbots, and that's our consensus about the situation at hand. I have a picture here. It's supposed to kind of look like a Girl Scout, because that's where I learned that saying, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And I did a lot of consulting with AI to come up with this presentation, but clearly I designed it because an AI would not be weird enough to use a Girl Scout theme. That would be me. So don't do this. We're just going to do a show of hands because I didn't realize we weren't going to have internet access. I'm just going to ask you a couple questions so that I know where you guys are at with AI. How many of you have used ChatGPT? Okay, so almost everyone. How many of you have used Gemini? It used to be called Bard. And then how many of you have used Copilot? Okay, so most people have in fact used AI at this point. A year ago when I was giving the presentation, many of the people I was talking to had not even talked to a chat tool yet. This is Gartner. Gartner says the future outlook of AI is that by the end of this year, 40% of enterprise applications will have chatbots. I'm kind of actually imagining that that's the question on most people's mind. Like, if you don't have a chatbot, you want one. Should you get a chatbot? Chatbots are great. Are they great? We'll find out. In the future, the way that business is supposedly heading is that you're going to have an AI augmented development testing process, 30% by 2025, 2026, 60% of design effort for new websites and mobile apps will have generative AI design. Then we're going to have 100 million humans with robo-colleagues, that sounds very fancy, but I think they just mean that we'll be using AI chats. And then by 2027, nearly 15% of new applications will be automatically generated by AI without a human in the loop. And I think by applications, they mean apps and not like job applications. So the first thing, my advice, not the city's advice, but the city is in fact, Wes is here and we are in fact working on an AI policy at this moment for the city, is that you do need an AI policy. Why do you need an AI policy? Because 60% of your workers are already using AI. And they may not be telling you about it. And also in that same study that I drew from, it turned out that of those people, this was an anonymous survey, most said that they would continue using it, whether there was a policy that prohibited it. So, you know, if you can say like, oh, I don't want all those legal problems. Nobody use AI. But that's kind of just going to drive it underground. So you want to pull it up into the light and actually have a bit more control over what your workers are doing. You want to avoid copyright problems. So for instance, you may or may not know that you can't copyright a logo that was generated by AI. There's lots of logo makers out there. You can make your own logo, but you can't copyright that. So if somebody else decides they want that exact same logo, it's potentially theirs. Your employees may be sharing confidential data. You know, your reputation could be harmed if your employees are doing something with the AI, maybe using an AI that could get you in trouble, especially with all of the pending legal stuff that Martin talked about. And then also, new regulations are going to come out, and you want to kind of get ahead of that as well. And the big thing to get ahead of in the new regulation seems to be tied up with like the New York Times lawsuit, Sarah Silverman, the comedian, all of that, saying the LLMs, they have to say where they're getting their stuff from. So I think in the future, we're going to be heading towards legislation that's going to try and make that more transparent. And there may be points when you're going to have to pull things based on whatever the new decisions are from the court. So you want to be flexible, you want to have an AI policy. It should not be don't use AI, because that's not going to work. So how do you use AI? Once you've decided, like, yay, this is great, my employees are using it, I'm going to use it, we're all going to use it, everybody's going to get a chatbot. Just using it indiscriminately is not helpful. You probably want to use it only if it can do something that you're already doing better, cheaper, or faster. Otherwise, you might be wasting your time. You could, in fact, be using AI to do something that it's not that good at. So you want to make sure that you're using it for something that it's good at. AI currently is really good at image recognition and language. It's really bad at math. So while I was testing things, because I like to play with them, I thought, oh, AI is a robot, so it'll be great at math. And I said, here's a problem that is past my ability to do it. I'm going to make a paper dragon out of paper chains with 3 swags, and I'm going to make each link of the paper chain this long. I will ask it, and I'll tell it how long the swags are. I will ask it, how many links in the paper chain do I need to make? It did not. It just gave me weird garble. It was like, what about 3 links? And I was like, no, the dragon's 15 feet long. And they were like, the AIs were like, I don't know. I don't think I can do that. So don't go in trying to use it to solve apparently complex math problems. So when you are starting out on like what is it that we are going to use AI to do better, you want to identify the task and the data. That sounds really obvious, but it's not. When you identify the task, you want to break it down into all of the steps. And that may even be time consuming enough that you reconsider. So maybe not. So for instance, one of the things that I'll talk about that I did was I work with the Rotary, and I'm supposed to buy Rotary books to give as a gift from the library, for them to give back to us. Anyways, it's complicated. On the topic that each speech is on. But the website where the speakers are listed is sort of updated indiscriminately. So I don't always have like a good list or know when there are new speakers, and I want to buy things ahead of time. So I wanted to create something where I could scrape the data from that site and put it in a Google spreadsheet. So that I could, and then have it also then alert me, hey, something new went on there and we added it to your spreadsheet. This was really hard. It took me a lot of work to do that simple thing. I don't have a degree in computer science, I'm just a dabbler. So I had to do 2 or 3 different things. And then I realized like, actually maybe AI is not the right solution for this, and maybe that's not what I want to do. Maybe I just want to set up a website pinger to ping me whenever the website is updated, and then just put up a little ping on my Google spreadsheet to tell me when somebody updates my spreadsheet, and then ask a coworker to update the spreadsheet when they get the ping. So I have somebody else updating the spreadsheet. So AI may or may not be the best solution. Depends on what you're capable of doing, how much you want to pay, and how you want to do the tasks. Now, things it is good at, it's good at taking notes. It's good at transcription. There are lots of things that it's great at. It's great at being a digital sort of colleague that I can use to edit things and get ideas for instance, in this presentation, because I did not know about this task, so I used it to help me prepare for this. The next thing you want to do in terms of like easiest to hardest, so easiest is just like, help me write this letter to somebody. Great, it's easy. You go on Copilot, it helps you write the letter. That's good. The next thing is built-in AI solutions. So you may already be using stuff that already has AI in it. So you don't want to pay for instance, a transcription AI app if what you're using already has it. So at work we use WebEx. Is that too much to tell? Okay. And it has an AI application in there so that if I have a meeting in WebEx, I can get a transcript of the meeting and it can summarize the bullet points for me already. So it would have been a waste of my time to go out and to find a new service that could do that when, hey, we already pay for something that does that. Or if I'm like, oh, I need to go find something that will help me get better, make my presentations. Oh, well, we already have a Canva subscription. You can already go into Canva if you're already paying for it, and it can help you create your presentation, which I said I did not use Canva to automatically generate this presentation, but I could have. If it's a really boring topic and you don't want it to be creative in any way, you can have it just spit out a presentation based on a 1-sentence description of your topic. You're already paying for that. You've already got it, or it's already free. Use what you already have, and also I think Christoph said that's kind of the future we're looking at anyways, is that it's going to be built into everything we already have. So investigate what you've got. So the next thing up is you've investigated all of the tools that you already have for your business. You've looked at the ways that it already can serve you with its AI, and it's not doing what you want it to do. You think, oh, I just really want this to take all my user data and make a predictive model for when my people are going to default on their loans, right? That would be good to have. If you're a lender and you want to know when people will default, you'd like something that could do that. then you're going to want to move up to the next phase. That's not something that generally a person who has no experience with computers other than the internet can do. That's something you're going to need to do either a low-code, no-code platform or get RPA or custom AI development. Low-code, no-code doesn't mean actually no-code, no-code. Those are the things that I'm playing with, and it's a journey for me to learn it. I would say if you've used maybe some Access database things, if you've used any coding at all, you'll be able to maybe use some of these. Let's see what examples are: AppSheet automation, Notion AI, things like that. The next step up is RPA. That's for serious coders. You can do it yourself if you want to buy something called a robotic process automation. And then the fifth thing is custom AI development. That's where you bring somebody in, you pay them. Now that can cost, and I've looked up different estimates for how much this costs all over the place. $5,000 to $1 million. So it depends on what you want to do. But before you do that, try and do all the other things. Lastly, the advice is to proofread, proofread, proofread. Don't treat the AI like it's perfect. Treat it like a coworker that makes mistakes. So you got to check what you do, and you want to make sure that your employees are checking what they do. Since you now are being in an open environment where everybody's acknowledging that they're using AI, you want them to say, hey, you're using AI, don't forget, double check it, send it to a coworker. You want to upskill your workforce. You want to help people use AI in a good way. You want to teach them. You want to have them actually maybe look at, like I said, the products that they're already using. That's something you could have your workers do for you instead of, I don't know, just firing everybody, which is what a lot of people like doing nowadays. And then I also really want people to remember that you still have to do the work. It doesn't do the work for you. And that business is still about relationships. So I'm just going to give a brief example. We're going to talk about chatbots. Or not chatbots, excuse me. My bank apparently mistranscribed my social security number. I've been with them for ages. I don't know how that happened. But then when I went to reset my code, they said that that wasn't my social security number. And I was like, that's a problem, because I know who I am. So I called them. It was hard to get through to a person. So then I called my local bank, and my local bank said, oh, we don't have any power to do any of that. You have to call back. And so I called back, and then I realized, oh, I'm talking to a chatbot. This is not a person. The chatbot does not understand that this is, in fact, Anyways, it felt like turtles all the way down. And I was like, at some point, I want to reach a person who knows how to do something. So if you do decide to use AI, you want to figure out how to retain the human element so that when humans need to step in, they can step in easily. Because that definitely gave me a worse impression of my bank than I had before. And then, this is the prepare for change. Whatever you do, just remain very flexible. So stay informed. Bring humans into the loop. That's basically the proofreading, and also making sure that you have lots of people sort of paying attention to what's going on in your organization. If you want to learn more about AI, you might join a working group with colleagues who have similar interests. Track your sources, that is, where is your AI getting its stuff from? And then have an AI review process so that before you engage with AI, you know whether it's one you want to add to your list of things that you use or not. And then this is for later. These are all really good sources that I tracked down, that I use to, not that track down, these are things I listen to and read all the time. So these are how I stay informed, and you could also use that to stay informed if you want. And then these are works cited. So you can click there and read all the stuff I read, and then be just as smart as I am.